right. So, good morning. So, we have been talking about cyber crisis management exercise, and cyber crisis management exercise is something that organizations do in order to test their ability to respond to a crisis, cyber crisis. And as we discussed, cyber crisis is something that is a rather rare incident, but the incident, once it happens, the consequences are very high, and it basically disrupts the business processes. So whatever is the business that your organization is in, you have to figure out what kind of disruption would constitute a crisis. And then accordingly, you have to have a crisis management plan, and that management plan has to be well understood by all stakeholders, including the topmost level management, so that when a crisis happens, first of all, decision makers have to first decide whether the incident that they are dealing with is actually a crisis rather than just an incident. But bigger issue then is that once you declare that it is a crisis, there are certain mechanisms, certain response playbook has to come into effect, and once that playbook comes into effect, everybody who has been given responsibility to do certain things has to do that. For example, the IT team has to do certain things in terms of maybe shutting down certain applications, shutting down certain computing servers or internet facing servers, or segment a part of the network which has been affected, and so on. Similarly, the cybersecurity team may have to do data collection for further forensic analysis, or forensic analysis in order to even understand what is actually affected and what has not been affected. And similarly, the communication teams has to decide whether it needs to be reported to the regulatory authority, such as CERT-In. For example, they require certain types of incidents to be reported within 6 hours. So you have to decide whether you have to do that, and if you have to do that, you have to collect the right set of information which can be actually communicated to the regulator, so that the regulator can decide whether to inform other regulated entities in the same sector in order for them to be cautious about, on guard about this kind of threat that this particular organization is facing. And then they have to also figure out how to communicate this to the outside world, including the press. In India, there is not much that is done in terms of informing the press and so on. But like for example, in the US now, the Security Exchange Commission, the organization equivalent to SEBI, the Security Exchange Board of India, they have required that this information should be, any kind of cyber attack has to be informed to the SEC, because it affects this, for example, if it is a crisis and if there is a effect on the business continuity, then it might have effect on the stock market value of the company and so on. So you have to do that communication part correct, what you want to communicate, how much you want to communicate, and also you have to communicate to the rest of the organization as to what to do and what not to do, whether to log into their system or disconnect their system, what kind of thing that they need to do at the time of crisis until the crisis is kind of dissipated. So that is what cyber crisis exercise does for you, to drill for this, to be prepared. So what here we are saying is that testing cyber crisis management allows us to validate or adapt certain tools and documents. So we also have to document everything that needs to be done, so that everybody knows exactly what needs to be done at the time something like this happens. So we have to be able to debug that document, like if the document has the right set of principles and right set of steps, and with the exercise you will know, otherwise you will only know when a real crisis happens, and that may be a little bit of a problem. And then they have to test the proper functioning of alerts and escalation chain, like the incident, usually there will be a SOC or Security Operations Center, where there will be SOC analysts, and the SOCs are usually manned 24/7, so they see what is happening, what kind of alerts are being generated and coming on the screen. And some alerts are not, depending on certain playbooks, so there has to be certain playbooks. Based on the playbooks, the SOC analysts will do certain things, like they will probably consider certain alert and say that, okay, this alert does not require higher level of intervention. In the SOC also, there are the analysts, SOC analysts also of different levels, right? So certain set of lowest level analysts will be under a certain higher level SOC analyst. So under certain circumstances, the analyst has to escalate that this incident or this event or alert does not look normal, so we need to do something about it. So this way the escalation may go all the way to the application owner or the administrators and so on. So therefore, during the crisis exercise, you might actually be able to test whether the alert escalation chains are actually working correctly or not. The crisis communication strategy can be debugged, like what has to be communicated to whom and when and so on. You can also test whether your backup systems are working, so the backup procedures has to be properly checked, and then you have to also test the business continuity plan or BCP or business recovery plan or BRP. Yes? Yeah, so this is contacts, incident response providers, insurance, supervisory authority, etc., right? So you have to know who to go to under what circumstances and who to contact, right? So being an SOC analyst, right? So if you are an SOC analyst, you are probably because you are part of a workforce which is 24/7. And oftentimes what we see in India at least, that these SOC analysts are actually not employee of the bank or employee of the organization. They are actually, say IBM, suppose you are using QRadar, IBM's SIEM tool, then IBM will provide you a workforce for doing this. Or maybe Tech Mahindra is providing your workforce. That workforce wouldn't know the exact supervisory chain of things. They only know that I have to come, in this week I have to come from 12 to 8 p.m. and I have been trained to see what alerts means what, and then I have been also been told that under these circumstances I have to inform so and so people. So that's the directory that they require, and that directory has to be correct. Otherwise, for example, somebody might have already left the organization and that is your escalation chain, right? Yeah. Okay, so now you have to decide the exercise format. So depending on what is the goal of your exercise, like sometimes we may do this exercise for awareness by the board level people or director level people or high level executives. In that case, it will be a different type of exercise than if you want to make all stakeholders aware and all stakeholders debug the procedures and be exact, know how to work together under a crisis and so on, then the exercise will be much more elaborate, right? So you have to also see what is your allocated budget, like usually these exercises require some money and also time. Time is money, of course. So if you have to actually make an exercise that is day long or 2 days, 3 days long, then you are basically losing productivity of employees. So you have to decide on that. So resource availability for also preparation. So usually preparation takes many weeks, right, to do an exercise correctly. and the level of experience and of the people in the organization. Initially you might do very simple ones and then gradually go for more complex ones. So the easiest type of exercise that you do is what is called a tabletop exercise. And tabletop exercise is much easier and usually done for top level management. And then there are simulation exercises where you do a lot more realistic attack scenario. Now sometimes you do it is the exercise announced and sometimes you do it unannounced, right. So if you do it unannounced, then it might actually create panic in the organization. So it is recommended by this these guys that do not do unannounced in an organization which has never seen an exercise, because that will create a lot of panic. So you do it, first few exercises you announce early on. And as I said that there are two types of exercise format, tabletop and simulation. So what is tabletop exercise? So tabletop exercise is about decision making, right. So you are not really going and actually doing the communication or doing the actual taking out part of the network or shutting down application and so on. You are just gather around a table and then moderator, there is always a moderator who would say who will describe the scenario and ask you to do what we call thought experiment, right. So everybody has to come, so everybody will be told to think of a mindset where a crisis has happened, right, and you have been informed. So at this point, like it might be that the CEOs and CISOs and CROs, these C-level executives, as well as the other major key players of the organization, including communication person or compliance legal person, etc., will be around. And then you will be actually saying that, okay, let's say you just got news that in the morning when people came to work, they found that many of their computers are showing ransom note and they are unable to log in, etc. And then you can also say after a while, so what needs to be done? Now the organization should have a playbook or something that requires to be vetted by the organization at various levels, and then has to be adopted, right. So everybody is given that playbook early on so that they know exactly what are they're supposed to do. But usually these incidents are not like, okay, if ransomware happens, this is what you have to do, and if a DDoS attack happens, this is what you have to do. If there is a data leak in the dark web, this is what you have to do. You do not necessarily have all possible scenarios in the playbook, right. So many times you have to improvise based on your understanding of what needs to be done. And the involvement of the top level management is important, because you have to sometimes make a decision to cut your losses. So you might actually have to shut down production in order to actually arrest the spread of the threat. But that decision cannot be made by CISO or somebody at the lower level. It has to be coming from the topmost level of management. So during this this thought experiment, the CEO will be asked like maybe somebody will say, CISO will say that, okay, here is the problem. If we do not shut down production right now, or if we do not shut down our e-commerce website for like couple of hours, we cannot handle this. Then the CEO has to make a decision, right there and then, what needs to be done. So this everybody will have some decision point where they have to make those decisions, and this has to be exercised, right. So if you do not have the experience of doing this, so I have had an experience of doing this tabletop exercise depending on the moderator. So in our case, the moderator was from Israel, so he knew exactly how to create the tension, right. So you have to create the tension, and you have to create the sense of urgency that this kind of thing requires. And this may actually also involve, like in case of, let's say in case of this is happening in a power system, large power system company like NTPC and so on. you might have to bring in the regulator also in the tabletop exercise, right. So, the duration of this kind of exercise is 2 to 3 hours, including briefing and debriefing. And in the debriefing, the moderator would say that what went wrong, what didn't work out, or what was done well, etc., etc. And the preparation time is about 6 weeks. So, it doesn't happen overnight, like tomorrow we'll do some exercise and you do that, but you need some preparation. So, the benefits, as you can imagine, it's ideal for an organization that has never done a crisis simulation, and it helps people to have a little time to devote to the exercise. So like CEOs and C-level executives or board members, they would rather do this than actually do a 2-day long simulation crisis exercise. And it gives you ideas, right. So, once you get into that urgency mode, your mind works towards like, this can be done or that can be done. So, these ideas can be then later on during the debriefing can be actually consolidated and decided whether to accept or not. Now, actual crisis scheme, like if a real crisis happens, these are all decision making kind of simulation, but actually you may sit and make decision that shut down this or inform them or do this and that, but if the right stakeholders and right set of employees do not do the right thing, then all your decisions are of no use. So in order to actually in order to check whether your crisis schemes actually would work in the right way, then you have to actually do this in a more elaborate scheme, and that is what the simulation exercise is all about. So simulation exercise is actually very long. It's usually between half day to 2 days. It may also take longer. So you have to, in your crisis management plan, you have to have various crisis units, right. So crisis units, what we were saying earlier, we didn't go into the kind of details that you require to actually build a simulation exercise. Your organization should have certain crisis units. So certain crisis units, including crisis units related to earthquake, fire, flood, etc. But you can also have crisis units related to cyber attack. You can have crisis units related to communication, etc. So you have to actually have one or more crisis units playing, and then there is a moderating unit. Moderating unit is the set of people who are actually designing the exercise, as well as during the exercise they are creating they are narrating the story that is unfolding, as well as they are going to create the sense of urgency that is required. Now, if there is if all the crisis units are there, then obviously it will be very involved and realistic one. But in case not all crisis units are at hand, then you can actually simulate the other crisis units actions by the moderating unit. So the moderating unit can actually say I will do assume that the communication is done, or assume that certain network actions have been taken, etc. So you can have various types of configuration, like decision making units alone, or decision making units and various other entities, including subsidiaries and other units. So more participants means more realistic simulation exercise. So it takes about half day to 2 days, including 2 to 6 months of preparation time. And the benefits are that it gives you a deep immersive experience, including increased awareness, including the not only the top level decision makers, but it can involve very real employees who are actually involved in doing things, and also others who might be watching this exercise may actually get some more awareness. You can test the interaction between various crisis units and show where it needs improvement in terms of communication, because multiple crisis units have to work together. Now, what theme you are going to take? Like, are you going to make a theme on ransomware attack? Are you going to make a theme of data leakage? or are you going to make a theme of an industrial accident induced by a cyber attack, or are you going to make it something like a DDoS attack or malware attack, etc. So you have to decide what is the theme that you are going to do, and to decide on the theme there are several things that people would have to consider. One thing to consider, of course, is what is the threat landscape for that particular sector. If that sector is getting affected by ransomware a lot, then maybe ransomware is one of the exercise that you must do. If it is that some other like data stealing or data exfiltration is one of the major threat that people are facing, then you have to do accordingly. And also you have to say what are the past crises that has happened and so on. Now what this recommendation says in this French document is that some people are often convinced that the systems are flawless, right. So in order to avoid this pitfall, you may actually do a little bit of a game, right. So actually you can use an uncorrected, unpatched vulnerability and do something and scare people. Or you can also use your system administrators to actually make it look like your lot of computers have been ransomed, right. So ransomware note will show up in the front page and so on. So you can do certain things like that, but this is a bit of a risky thing. So the events that you normally assume or create your theme around are of course the website defacement is a simple one. It's actually more reputational damage than actual harm, but denial of service could actually shut down your business for a while. Data exfiltration, both personal data like PIIs, personally identifiable data, as well as critical data that is critical to your business may not be personally identifiable. So you are not under DPDP or Digital Privacy Act, but you might actually lose business specific important information such as IP, like business secrets and so on. Data encryption and destruction like ransomware attack, and destruction of services. So they might actually get into your system and shut down services and remove the code and this kind of attacks. So these are just a few examples. You can think of other possible events to exercise. So the potential impacts considered in the exercise, of course, are first is reputational element is there. Reputational damage costs money because you may lose future customers, so you have to take that into account. And also you have to think about effect on business continuity, which means that you will lose money by not being able to sell the products or not being able to produce the products that you are normally producing in your factory, etc., or you are unable to produce power and hence you are losing money, etc. You can have reputational impact because personal data is lost and therefore you are attracting wrath of the GDPR and DPDP, this kind of regulations. You might have other commercial impacts including trust of your customers. You can have you have to also create scenarios in which backup has to be tested, like whether your backup system worked and whether it has the latest backup. So banks, for example, so based on RBI regulation, all banks have usually now 3 data centers. So they have a primary data center or what is called a DC, a data center, and then they have a DR, that is their recovery in case the primary data center gets attacked or any other like fire and other damages, then they should be able to do all the activities from the secondary data center or DR. And then nowadays they have a disaster recovery, that is if both of them get affected, then the third one has to be working. So in doing so, what happens is that so in a bank there are multiple applications, usually in the order of 30-40 different very sensitive real-time applications like core banking application, for example. So these applications have to be replicated in all the data centers, and they must be always in the running state, right? So so that in case this one fails, there would be a failover recovery in the other data center, right? And then from there other data center. So RBI mandates that all banks have to test every quarter a real failover, right? So they actually intentionally have to move all their applications from one data center to the other. Now, and customer should not know. So if you are connecting to like SBI net banking or SBI YONO or whatever, it should be transparent to you that right now SBI is moving all the applications. So all the requests from the customer now move to the other data center. So this kind of thing, often it turns out that, so yesterday I was talking to a bank, and they had some applications not running in their other data center. And so during this process, they found that one of their application customers could not do this because they had customers could not be served because they did not have that application running on the other one. So this kind of tests have to be done often. So in case of a simulation crisis, you can also create a scenario in which your primary data center has been affected by the attacker, and secondary one has to be initiate all the customers have to be moved to the second one or maybe on the third one, and so every quarter the banks are not only they are supposed to test, they have to give the report of that test to RBI every quarter, right? So this is the process. Same thing with the exchanges, right? So for example, securities exchanges like Bombay Stock Exchange or National Stock Exchange, they actually have to do the same exercise, and this secondary and tertiary data centers are in different geographical locations, so that if there is earthquake in Bombay, the other one may be in like Chennai, right? The other data center may be in Chennai. So probability that both will have the same natural disaster is low. But in terms of cyber attack, you cannot make that prediction that they may both be affected, right? So you have to create that segregation between the data centers so that something that is affecting one does not cascade into the other. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say about cyber crisis management. Now I'm going to go into the next topic, which is cyber resilience review. So cyber resilience, so we have been discussing this a few times here, that cyber resilience is basically your ability to fight through a crisis, right? So when you have an attack, if your organization completely collapses, right, and does not recover for a long time because it does not have backup, it does not have the right ability to actually rebuild the systems that have been affected and so on, then we say that that organization have no resilience, right? So this is the idea of the resilience. A city is considered resilient if when a natural disaster happens like a hurricane or a storm, if the entire infrastructure, the power infrastructure, the water supply infrastructure, gas supply infrastructure, if everything collapses and it takes days for recovery, then we say that that city does not have resilience, right? So resilience is a term that is used for any kind of system that needs to recover, and not only recover, it should be able to withstand the disaster in a way so that it is graceful. It does not it does not completely collapse. It might have reduced quality of service. It might not provide the agreed upon level of service, but it should be able to at least provide some minimal service, and as time progresses, it should be able to recover without much problem or too much additional unplanned intervention. And that time that it takes to recover is kind of a measure of what we call measure of resilience. So it's kind of an elasticity measure, right? So if you have something elastic, if you deform it, it will immediately come back as soon as you remove the force that deforms it. But if it is not elastic, then it will actually deform and it will very slowly regain its original shape, right? So that then we say that that is less elastic. Same thing with the resilience. If you deform the situation, and then if it comes back to the normal very quickly, then we say it is more resilient than the other system where it is not like that. So cyber resilience is very important. Oftentimes people earlier, 10 years, 20 years ago, people used to think that, okay, we have to stop all cyber attacks and that's the only thing we have to do, right? So we have to put firewalls, we have to use antivirus, we have to use whatever means I have to stop the attacker from entering my system. Unfortunately, that scenario has changed, and we have found that attackers are usually clever, and they often, more often than not, they actually defeat or evade our protection or our detection system. So we have to assume that attacks will happen no matter what level of security I provide. That doesn't mean that we should not provide the best security that is possible using defense in depth and all that, but irrespective of all that, attacks will happen. In the worst, even if you have the best perimeter defense, the problem is that there could be insider attack. There could be social engineering to bring an attack into a system which has been completely secured in the perimeter, right? There is also the possible, now the perimeter is also not well defined because of work from home and multi-site organizations and so on. So the process that we have to remember is that we have to assume attacks will happen. So the question now is that when attacks happen, you reduce the probability of the attack happening, but since the probability, you cannot reduce the probability to 0, therefore we have to assume that attacks will happen in the worst case, and we have to be prepared for that. And that preparedness is basically the preparedness for or resilience. Resilience is the kind of like the property that says that when I am attacked and my services are compromised, my business continuity is compromised, I do not necessarily completely collapse with I gracefully degrade, but as soon as this problem is withdrawn by the attacker, I am able to stop the attacker, I should be able to get back to normal service scenario. Now, what the Department of Homeland Security in the US, they are very concerned. They have this organization called CISA. The CISA is the Critical Infrastructure Security Agency within the Department of Homeland Security. Department of Homeland Security is very concerned because, see, eventually all the critical infrastructure entities are no longer government controlled, right? So even in India, right? So power, there are private Tata Power, you have Adani Power, you have the, Reliance Power, and so on and so forth. You have organizations that are providing your water treatment and sewage treatment in a city. They might be private, or even if they are not private, they are managed by municipal corporations which are not directly under the purview of the government of central government, for example. So now the question is that how do you make sure that all these organizations are resilient? Because see, eventually if they don't want to be resilient, they will not be resilient, right? If their board says that I don't want to spend money on becoming resilient, cyber resilient, because I don't believe cyber attacks will happen, then you cannot really do much unless you bring it under regulation. And in that case, there should be a regulator. The regulator will have the ability to ask for reports or cyber audit reports, resilience review reports, and so on. And the regulator will also provide the regulatory instructions as to what kind of things you have to do in cyber security, what do you need to do. So right now, like as we speak, like this week and previous week, the power system in India, power system cybersecurity regulations are being finalized eventually, right? So today is, we are in 2024. So in 2020, this regulation was started to be written, and it took like 4 years to eventually finalize, right? Now, these regulations will tell you what kind of cybersecurity controls you have to have, whether you have to be compliant to certain standards such as ISO 27001, or do you have to be compliant with standard like ISO or IEC 62443, or you have to provide a cyber audit report every 6 months or every 3 months. You have to also, they might also tell you that you have to do a risk assessment every 6 months. They might also tell you that based on risk assessment results, you have to do certain things. They might also tell you some specific controls, such as you have to have firewalls, and you have to have segregation of your network, you have to have two-factor authentication for all employees. You may have to do this kind of network segregation between your plant where the actual power generation is happening or transmission is happening, and your IT system. So this is all in the part of the regulation, right? So similarly, what these guys have done, they said, okay, Department of Homeland Security, they said, okay, so let's look at what NIST is telling us. So NIST CSF, or Cybersecurity Framework, and they actually, NIST now just last week published NIST CSF 2.0, but we are, this thing is not yet according to 2.0, so we'll talk about NIST CSF 1. So NIST CSF 1 is a cybersecurity framework that actually was developed by NIST along with many different stakeholders, including stakeholders in the Department of Energy, oil and gas, and manufacturing, etc. What are the minimum things that one needs to do for cybersecurity of critical infrastructure organizations, right? So that is NIST CSF. So NIST CSF tells you that you have to have 5 functions, right? So that they call it identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So these are 5 functions. In NIST CSF 2.0, they added a new function called govern, which was earlier part of all of these. So there are 6 functions now in NIST CSF. So every organization must check, am I fulfilling this function, am I fulfilling this function, and so on. So all the functions must be there, implemented, the right stakeholders identified, and right technology to implement those functions must be in place. Second thing that NIST CSF says is that that you have to have certain tiers of implementation, right? So not everybody requires to be in the topmost tier of implementation of cybersecurity, because let's say you are a small, a small town water treatment plant, right? You are only you are only supplying water to 1,000 people, right? I am talking about US scenario. So then the question is that how much cybersecurity is required. Now, it has been the case that in the US in the last few years there has been numerous attacks on water treatment plants, even in small towns, right? It's an opportunistic, right? So it was not necessarily very planned. So the question is that how much resilience should that have? Now, in a town of 1,000, if water suddenly stops in the middle of the summer, it's going to be a problem irrespective of how small the town is, right? So it is actually something, but the tier of implementation may not be the highest tier of implementation for this kind of organization. So now the question is that how does Department of Homeland Security know whether an organization is resilient, right? So resilient, and remember the resilience is relative term, because if your business is to actually supply water, purify and supply water from a lake near you to a town of 1,000 people, then your business continuity is about just keeping the supply on, right? So it's a very simple organization. Whereas if you have an organization that is supplying water, in the whole New York City, for example, or Manhattan, for example, then it would be a lot more complex. It might have other things other than the just the continuity of supplying water. So based on the business, what business you are in, and what it means to be serving your customer, what it means to be providing the quality of service and the service level agreement, upholding the service level agreement, your resilience will be defined accordingly. So the resilience is not necessarily fixed for every organization, like what level of resilience is required. Now, in order for regulator to know that you are resilient, they have to measure your resilience, right? And to measure the resilience, what this DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, has done is that they went to some document called the Resilient Measurement Model, created by Software Engineering Institute at Carnegie Mellon University, and it's called RMM. And then using that, they have created a nice questionnaire, right? And this questionnaire has a very good structure, which we'll see. So you can actually do what is called a self-assessment, or CRR. CRR is the Cyber Resilience Review. So you actually can review your cyber resilience using this self-assessment questionnaire, and then you can interpret the report, whatever you get, and then you can do follow-up to actually fix the problems that you identify with the resilience problem. So this questionnaire has 299 questions. So you have to go into an organization. So they have DHS can actually send. So if you say to DHS, I do not have right people to do this, to do self-assessment, they will send people to your organization, and they will say, okay, give me 6 hours, and these are the people who should be assembled with me, like people who are involved in IT, people who are involved in security, people who are involved in risk, and so on. And then they should answer me questions, and once I get the answers, I will fill the questionnaire, and then questionnaire will be automatically scoring you, right? So this is an instrumented file which actually can give you, once you answered all the questions, it will actually give you show you what the resilience level is, where it needs to improve, and all that stuff. So that's the beauty of this document. So I will share the document with you. You can play with it a little bit. So here is the document. So here you can answer questions like so let's quickly look at some questions. So it is divided into 10 different domains, right? So every organization that needs to be resilient has to have different domains in which it should be resilient. So here is your asset management. So do you know what cyber assets are actually connected to your network, right? Is it how many servers are there, what those servers are for, what services they are involved in, what kind of operating system, firmware, applications they run. All that information should be documented and updated as soon as that server has been updated, or server has been new application has been put into that server, and so on. So asset management, within asset management, they say, okay, here are certain goals that needs to be fulfilled by the organization. For example, goal 1 is services are identified and prioritized. See, eventually, why do you have assets, or why do you have IT system? Because you are providing some service. That service might be customer facing service, like for example, if you are Amazon, you are actually running server farms or cloud, etc., to run your front end of your Amazon shop. But you also have services such as goods management. You may have services for employee payroll. You might have some services for HR management. So you have many services in the organization. Some are customer facing, some are for actual running of the organization. So in order to identify assets, you have to first identify what are the services, and then you have to identify what assets, like what servers, what network equipment, what kind of database server, etc., are involved in providing that service. So if you can identify all the services and then you can identify all assets associated with that service, then you can actually figure out whether you have anything redundant, whether there are things that are not even required in your organization. So first question they will ask you, are the services identified, right? Now you can have answer yes, or you can say no, or you can say incomplete. That is, I have started identifying all the services, but I do not have every service identified. In a very large organization like Amazon, this might be quite a challenge to actually identify all the services. So are the services prioritized based on the analysis of potential impact if the services are disrupted? So how can somebody disrupt a service, right? By actually, I mean, from the cyber angle. From the cyber angle, you can disrupt a service by actually disrupting one of the assets involved, right? So either the application or the network or the database server, etc. So the question then we'll ask is that once you have said, okay, here are the services 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these are my services, these are the assets associated with the services. Now I have to say, okay, if this service gets interrupted, is it going, how much impact it will have to my bottom line, to my business continuity. If you find that some services I can do without and some services I have to have running all the time, then the one that is supposed to run all the time has to be prioritized over the one that I can do without, right. So that is the prioritization of the services. Because without the prioritization, I wouldn't know where to put the more security to protect. Is the organization's mission, vision, values and purpose, including the organization's place in critical infrastructure, identified and communicated? Now this is very important. Now one might think that what has this got to do with cybersecurity? Interestingly, that an organization, especially critical infrastructure organization. So now this is, remember, this is designed for critical infrastructure organization. So for a critical infrastructure organization, one has to figure out this whether my organization and the thing I do, like my mission, my purpose, etc., are aligned with the national critical infrastructure. So if I am a power generation company, like I am like UPPCL, I would need to know what will be my impact if I go down, right, to the entire power system. Because remember, the 2012 blackout that was created was actually started from UP, right. So it basically, one transmission line went down and then it started cascading, then it started going to all the north, like 600 crore people were powerless, right. So it can be one power organization that could actually start a cascading failure. So you have to know what is your, what is the, what is my impact if I go down on the overall scheme of things. And then are the organization's mission, objectives and activities prioritized, right. So you might have multiple different missions and multiple different, like a power company, but which one is going to be more important, or you might have multiple different missions, including one in power, one in maybe gas, the same company, then you have to prioritize which one will affect more. So these questions are to be answered, and this way, and we'll go through this, you will basically will be answering, I mean not you, I mean the whoever has to do this, 299 questions, and then you have to basically figure out it will automatically, see here they have programs, the JavaScript programs. So, you can actually print the report, you can print the assessment form and so on. So, this is all automated. Last time I taught this class, I actually asked different groups to actually go to CC and ask these questions. I do not think that went very well. So, but this time we will not go into that, but you should know why these things are important and what are the questions and why those questions were put into this assessment. Okay, so we'll take it from here next class.